All right, in today's video, we are going to go through a process to use a Google Search API to search for results or search for answers on the internet. So then if an answer is not directly available from a Google search result, use the context of the organic results, so number of results, to feed it into OpenAI to be able to then come up with a custom response or custom answer to the question or query that was asked. This is part of a longer series where we're going to go through how to build an AI agent using no-code tools. This is one of those tools that AI agent may have to be able to search the internet, to search Google for a specific answer and then return it back to the agent to then be able to do something else with it. But at the same time, you could use just this as part of your functionality or part of something that you want to build within your app. And so we wanted to go through this as a standalone video. So basically the process is going to work like this. You're going to have a question or a query. It's going to start here, and then it's going to go to this Google Search API. We're using Serper.dev to be able to do this, and I'll kind of walk through what happens there. And basically there's going to be two different possibilities. Sometimes Google has like almost a little answer box. It says like, this is your question, this is the answer. If that exists, we're just going to go ahead and return that answer. We don't need to go to OpenAI to be able to come up or formulate an answer. But if that's does not appear, basically you're just going to get organic results. You know, 1 page, 2 pages, whatever results. And then what we're going to do is we're going to feed all of those results into OpenAI to be able to then answer the question using those results as context for the question to then be able to answer and then come up with a natural language response, again, back to that custom question that you asked. So for example, I'll kind of go through like Google results. All right, say I want to know how old Matt Damon is. I'm going to type into Google, how old is Matt Damon? This is that answer box. It says 52 years old, gives his birth date, October 8th, 1970. So if this exists, we just want to use this. We don't need to go through another whole call to OpenAI, the cost of going to OpenAI. We just want to get that result and then respond back to the user or to the question that this is the answer to this question, to this query. But a lot of times that's not what exists. So I'll kind of go through the Serper API first. Go to serper.dev. You'll get to here. You can log in, sign up. You get 1,000 queries for free, and then you pay after that. But basically, if I type in here, how old is Matt Damon, you're going to see what the results look like here. So you get first answer box, title, Matt Damon, age. If you go back to here, you kind of see Matt Damon, age, and then you get 52 years old. And then you have the organic results that come back one at a time. So you have this first one, which is Wikipedia, which actually comes with a couple different things from Wikipedia, position 1, and then you have position 2 from Britannica and National Today, and go through this whole result. So these are all the organic results that you have. For each organic result, there's a snippet, which is the text kind of summary or headline for that. So it's a little bit more than just like a small headline from or title from the group thing. It's usually the description of that website, which gives more information, which is what we are going to use as the context to be able to formulate an answer as part of what we might build out if we need to go to the OpenAI side. So again, going back, if the answer box exists, just use that. If it does not exist, we're going to use the organic results to feed it in as context into the OpenAI chat completions API, and then go through that to then formulate that answer. For today's video, I'm going to go ahead and use Xano to be able to build that because of the logic needed, as well as some data manipulation. This specific part of it could be built in Bubble itself. But the AI agent and some of the functionality there probably is not able to be built in Bubble. And so for the continuity from this to the AI agent side, we're just going to build everything in Xano. In that instance, then we can use what we're going to build now as a function in the AI agent later on in another video that I'll be creating. So let's go to the Xano side. If you don't have an account, go ahead and set up. You can kind of get something set up for free to at least this build a plan. Enables you to set things up. So once you have that set up, you don't really have to set any tables up, any information. We'll go through and kind of go through some capabilities here to create an API. So what we're going to do is just create a custom API endpoint that is basically going to be a lookup function that's going to have an input of a query and then an output of the answer, similar to this. So if I go into on the Xano side, I go to API, I have this group that's called AI experiments. There's no endpoints in here yet. And I'm going to go ahead and start the process of building my new custom endpoint API for this function that we want to do. We'll go ahead and add API endpoint. I'm going to start from scratch. Just go. I'm going to call it look up, and I'm going to make it a post. It's going to be creating information as part of this. For this point, I'm not going to have an authentication enabled. If you're in an app, you may want to do that and how you're setting that up. But for the purpose of today, we're just not going to have authentication set up. Go ahead and save that. And now you get this side. And basically, it's broken into input, output, and things it's going to do with that input to then create the output. So the first thing I want to set up is basically like the query, the input that we need. So I'm going to go in. It's just a text input. It's just going to be search query. It's text. And then we're going to go ahead and save. And so that's the input to this query. So if I were to now go in, and we're going to go through this through the whole process, which is go to run and debug, it's going to show search query. I can run this and say, you know, how old is Matt Damon? And if I run it, it's going to return nothing because it doesn't do anything with that, but it runs. So that's a good first step. Now, the next thing that I'm going to need to do is go through and set up the function stack here. And there's one thing that I'm going to do. It's almost like a normal programming approach, which is to first declare a variable. And the one big variable that I need, because it's going to exist whether we have the answer box or not, and so there's going to be almost a divergence of paths here. So we want to set it up before we diverge in those paths. I'm going to create a variable, which is going to data manipulation. So if I actually go back and say I want to create something new in the function stack, so this is plus button, go to data manipulation, go to create variable. The variable that we're going to create is final answer. Cool. I'm just not going to put anything in here. We'll update this variable later on once we have a final answer, but we're just going to set up the variable now so that we can set everything else up on this side. So cool. So now that we have this variable, now we also know that that response is going to be final answer. So again, we're going to go back into here and say response is, instead of returning var _1, we wanted to return always this variable under var final answer. Sweet. So that's what it's going to return. So again, you can go back, run this, and then we're just going to get result because now there is that variable exists. It's just blank. Now we just get a blank result from here. Now, sweet. Now the next thing that we need to do is just to call this API, this Serper.dev API, the Google Search API, to then be able to go through that. And so let's go ahead and do that. So first on the function stack side, we're going to add another function. So we're going to press the plus, and now we're going to do an external API request. I'm going to pause here and go over to the Serper playground just to get the curl command basically. So if you go into here, you'll have an account, and you can go to playground here, which is, if you go to code, is where you'll get the curl command. This one has just a default information. It's a search. Apple Inc. is the query that we're putting in here, asking if you want autocorrect. That's the default. And we want 10 results, which is the default. If I want more, it'll be more credits. Let's just go with 10 results. 10 results, especially the first 10 results, should be enough context to be able to answer the questions that we need. So we'll use that as the default. I don't need to search for that, but I can go to the curl command here. So if I copy this curl command, and now I go over back to Xano, and I say import curl, I can then copy and paste that there, and you'll go ahead and put it there. And so it's going to then create the API request, which is going to be a post to this URL. It's going to have an API key. It's going to have content type, application /JSON, and then just one parameter, which is Q, is Apple Inc. and we'll change that later on. So I imported that now. Now this is all set up. So basically you have the parameter Q Apple Inc. First, let's change that. We don't want it to always be Apple Inc. We want it to be the value that is in our input. So search query. So sweet. That's it there. Now, the one other thing I think is an important thing to always do when you're dealing with API requests, especially in Xano, is instead of hard coding in your API key, is to actually set it up as a environment variable. So I'm going to first go through, I'll kind of copy this API key. You can also, on the Serper side where you find this, it kind of comes along when you do the curl command, but you can also go to API key and view it and get it there as well. So go ahead and close that, and I am going to update this one, and then I'm going to save this API request. We'll come back and fix that side of it first. But so we're going to go, in order to create this environment variable, which then gets called from here, let's go to settings on your environment, and you're going to go to manage environment variables, and we're just going to create a new variable, which is Serper API key, and then I'm going to paste the value there. Sweet. So now if I go back to the API that I was building, I am going to go back to API request. I'm going to replace this key with, instead of it hard-coded in here, I'm going to replace it with a variable. How do I do that in Xano is using a function called sprintf. In order to do that, basically you put a placeholder in, and then you use what's called a filter to be able to then replace that placeholder. So the placeholder for this sprintf function is %s. Okay? So if you put %s here, basically you're going to do this, press save, and then you add a filter into this text field here. So add filter, and then type in sprintf. And actually, let's just go to this. Formats text with variable substitution. So it takes what we have in that text field, and then it starts to then replace it. And so you have different arguments. In this instance, we have one argument, which is the 1%s. I can then add in here, the argument should be environment variable Serper API key. If I have 2%s, so %s, and I have another variable somewhere else, you just add on to the arguments, and they're always in the order in which they appear in that text field or text group. And we'll have actually an example later on where we do multiple of these. But for the purposes here, we just have one. So we do that, we update, and so now you'll see we have X API key %s with the sprintf with the replacing the Serper API key here. We'll save that. Now, sweet. Now we have something. It's going out and searching there. We're going to be able to put a term in here. So now let's run and debug again. Let's see what happens. So I say, how old is Matt Damon? Great. We don't get any results yet. But if I go into the debugger, I can start to see what it's actually doing. So if I go on this side, external API request, I see we provide variables, and then we have like a response. And from here, I can see response, result, and you see that I have an answer box. Obviously, we have Matt Damon /age 52. Same thing that we were getting on here when we were showing like exactly what the response is. Same stuff is coming now through on the Xano side. So now we need to be able to then extract out and pull what we need from there to be able to kind of go to a final answer. So great. So we have that. The first thing that I'm going to do here is, instead of calling it API1, which is the default name, I'm going to go to output, and we're just going to call it Serper so that we know what it is. Great. Now, the next thing that I need to do is now start to do, if we go back to this diagram, now we need to kind of almost go down two paths. We need to say, if the answer box exists, we need to right away just give the final answer. If it doesn't exist, we're now going to need to go to the OpenAI. And so that's where we're going to create a conditional kind of if-then scenario within Xano. So then I'm going to go through, press, oops, I'm not going back, and then we're going to go plus down here. You can either there or you can go here. Either way, works the same. And now we're going to go back to data manipulation, and we're going to go conditional. Great. So the conditional that we're going to go down, we need to first set what's the condition or what's the thing we're going to evaluate. Does answer box exist? So sometimes it'll exist, like in this instance. If I search for example, what new features are on the Ableton Push 3. So this was just released a couple days ago. So let's search. So obviously, actually, let's not go through this process on the non-signed in, so we don't have to go through that. Let's just go back to the playground here, and we'll do the same thing, which is what new features are on Ableton Push 3. Sweet. So I go through that, I get some results, and now you see that there's no answer box. It's just organic results. So it's just result 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 10. And so from that standpoint, we don't have the answer box, and so we have to go through that. And so if it doesn't exist, it's not just that it shows and it's blank or doesn't provide an answer. It just doesn't exist within the response. And so that's what we have to handle on the Xano side. So first we have to do this if statement. So if this answer box, and we want answer box answer. And if you kind of go back to, actually, if I run and debug it again, you're going to see on the response side, oops, we can't do it if we don't have, if we have this. We're going to disable this for now so we can run the debug. Sweet. Basically, you'll see that it's response dot result. So it's using dot notation, JSON dot notation. So it's response, and then the next hierarchy is result, and the next hierarchy is answer box, and the next hierarchy is answer. So we're going to need that response dot result dot answer box dot answer to be able to define that. Now, I'm going to show you kind of what happens on this side. So basically, let's go through, let's enable this again, and we're going to create the condition. And so what we said was we want to go to Serper, which is the variable, which is the result from that Google Search API. And we wanted to use that dot notation. So dot response dot result. I'm going to expand this so that I can see the whole thing. Dot answer box dot answer. Okay. And I'm going to say does not is not null. And if we just scroll all the way to the bottom here, we'll get a null. So we want, if this is not null, then we're just going to send the answer through. So let's go ahead and save that. Save that, and then let's just do that. So we're going to do, then if it's not null, if it exists, we're going to go to data manipulation, update variable. The variable we're going to update is final answer, and what we're going to answer it with is, again, the same thing, Serper dot response dot result dot answer box dot answer. Amazing. Sweet. So now let's see what happens. Let's go ahead and run debug. How old is Matt Damon? We're going to run it. Comes back 52 years old. Great. It went through that. Now, what happens if I do that search query that doesn't have an answer box? What happens? So what new features are on the Ableton Push 3? Uh-oh. It's unable to locate the variable result.answerbox.answer. So this is a problem, and this is something that we then need to solve in that conditional. So like the whole thing that we're trying to say is like, if this doesn't exist, if it's null, then do something else. Um, but if it causes an error, what do we do? So that let's like walk through how we would solve that. So instead of doing it like this, where I say Serper.response.result answer box, like if this doesn't exist, this isn't going to be able to find anything. So what we need to do is we need to truncate it to what will always exist, which is response.result. Save that, and then we're almost going to query at that point. Instead of always defining it, we're going to say get, and then the path is the same thing, answer box dot answer. And now what happens that it says the default, we provide a default value. So default is used if no value is found at that path. So if this path is not found, it's going to say it's null, which then gives us what we want. So if it's not found, it's going to be null, and then this operator not equals to null is going to fail, and then thus it's going to pass the information. So I go through that. So now if this is null, if it's not null, it will go through and go to update the final variable. Otherwise, it will do something else. So now if I run this, it should just come back with nothing because it doesn't know what to do in the second part. And the second part, again, going back to that diagram, is this OpenAI answers a question with organic results as context. So this is the part where I think it's unique. It's like almost like when you do ask Google or ask Siri for something, and if it doesn't have like an answer box type of result, it says like, here's the first result from the response. Would you like me to read about it? And it just gives you a response. It just gives you an article, and it kind of reads a lot of stuff versus like directly answering the question. What we want to do is directly answer the question and use OpenAI's abilities to be able to do that. So that's what we're going to do on this side. So going back to Xano, we're going to now fill in this last part, which is building out the OpenAI side. So let's go out of the debugger, and now we're going to do two things. One is first, we're going to create another variable, and that variable is going to be the prompt that we're going to ask. So we're going to create a variable, and we're going to call it prompt. And what we're going to do is we're going to set it as a certain type of thing. So basically it's going to be, let's start to type. I'm going to make it expand it here. So please answer the following question based on the below context. If you do not know the answer based on the context, please say so. Cool. And then we're going to basically put in context, question, answer. All right. And so this is how the kind of like the general format of these type of questions for OpenAI using the large language model is basically you add context, you say, here's the context, here's the question, answer the question based on the context you provide. And we've done this before in some other videos, but this is that general formula for a prompt based on this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use that same S printf to be able to then fill in these as variables. So I'll just, add in two %s. We'll add in %s, and then answers is going to be blank because that's what we're kind of like leading the large language model to then be able to prompt back with the answer to the question. So I'm going to go ahead and save this here in the text editor, and now I need to then add that filter, which is the S printf. So the first argument is the context. So now we need to get all the snippets, the text snippets from there. And I'm actually just going to update, and let's make sure we understand the format of how that comes. And I'm just going to disable this for now because we're kind of in process and might cause an error when I do the run and debug. But sweet. So if I look at the debugger, I look at the response from this API request. We have results, we have organic, so it's going to be result, response, result, organic, which is now an array. And then underneath that, it is snippet. Is that what we're going to use to be able to come up with a response for this? So organic dot snippet, organic being an array. Cool. So now if I go back to here, let's enable it again. And I am going to go back to that filter, which is s.printf. And now I need to fill in those arguments. So the first argument is going to be the context. The second argument is going to be the question that was originally asked that we needed to answer. So the first is, so we now need this, which is text, and we want it to be the Serper dot response dot result, again expand it, dot organic dot snippet. And now with dot notation, if I were to do it like organic dot 0 dot snippet, it would show me just the first item in the array, the index 0. But when I omit the number of the index, basically now it provides another array with just the snippets. So it's going to be an array of all those 10 snippets that are there. So great. So now I have an array, but that's not text, and that's not going to fit right in there. So I save that, and I add in another filter, which now takes the array of different text items and now combines it into one consistent text string. And the filter that we use for that is called join. So it joins an array into a text string via the separator and returns the result. So when I type in that, the text is we already have the array. That's what we had there. And the text separator, we're just going to put a comma space there, and that's going to be the separator. So now it will join. It'll take those all the snippets, and then join them into one text string separated by a comma. Great. So that's the first one. So we're going to save that for now. Now let's go back, and let's go back into s.printf and know that we have another argument here. The first one was the snippets for the context. The next one is the question. This one's a little bit easier. You just go to search query, text input, the original input, and do that. And so now you have the two arguments that we're providing. The 2% s's are being replaced first with the snippets for the context, and then with the search query for the question. So when this gets answered, it's going to replace this and this based on the s.printf, which is pretty awesome. So sweet. Now we have that. We have the prompt. Now we need to go and call the OpenAI side. So we are going to go to an external API request. Again, we're going to import a curl. So let's go to the OpenAI side. If you log in, let's go to the API reference. We are going to do a chat GPT 3.5 turbo. And so we're going to copy this curl command here. We go to Xano. I'll do import curl, copy that, import, and now we have that. This DRL, model, so forth, the role, the user, the content, and this is where we replace it. So the content should not be hello. It should be the variable prompt that we just created. So we're going to update that. And then this is where we need to do another replacing of the API key. So now we need to go, let's go to the API side here. Let's go to your account, view API keys, create a new key, for video, create a secret key. I'm going to copy this. Now going to go over to the Xano side. I'll go to settings, manage the environment variables. I need to now create another one, which is the OpenAI API key. And I will then paste the value in there and save. Now if I go back to my API, experiments, lookup, I can now replace on this side over here, I can replace this with another s_printf. So I can do the %s there, and then I add the filter in s_printf, and then my argument is the OpenAI API key. Sweet. The one other thing I want to do, because we're answering a question based on context, I want to reduce the temperature a little bit. So I think the default on here is 1. And so I want to add in another parameter. So it defaults to 1. I'm going to make it like 0.2. So it's going to be another item that we're going to add in terms of the parameters in the body here. So if I go to Xano again, now I have, you'll see we have different kind of like set, and this is the path right here. I'm going to add get set, and the path is going to be temperature, and the value is going to be 0.2. Cool. And we want that based on this high level hierarchy. So we added that. Let's just make sure that's the right thing. It's temperature. Yep. Cool. So now let's save this, and let's go ahead and run the debugger again. What new features in Ableton Push 3? Let's run it. It's going to go through the process. It's going to go to OpenAI. It's going to provide a response back. We're not doing anything with the response yet, so we haven't done anything here. But if I go into debugger and I go into this now second conditional external API request, I'm going to see that it sent over a parameter one message, please answer the following, and then it provided all the different things from the context, and then asked the question, what new features are in the Ableton Push 3, answer, and then space. And the response we will see is response.result choices, which is again a array with one item. And then we have message, and that message is some of the features include full implementation of MPE, new pads, and so forth. So this is the answer. So this is what we want to get to. So now remember, it's response.result.choices, and then it's going to we need the first item, index 0. So it's going to be choices.0.message.content. All right. Awesome. Let's see if we can remember that. All right, so we go in here, and now we need to update the variable, that final answer. Go update variable, and I am going to update final answer, and it's going to be, oh, actually, we didn't rename this, and now it's still called API 1. Let's rename that so that we have, it's not just something generic like that. Let's rename the output to OpenAI. Cool. Sweet. So let's now go back to update variable, and we want it to be final answer that we're updating, and we're going to, the value we're going to update it is OpenAI. It's going to be dot response dot result dot choices, spelled correctly, dot 0, because it's index 0, and I think it is message, singular or plural. Let's find out. Let's go singular. Message dot content. So OpenAI response dot result dot choices 0 index dot message Serper.content. Save. And then we're just going to save that. And let's go ahead and run it. So now it's going to go through this, do the final answer. So then when we run it, it should populate the final answer. Let's go through what new features are on the Ableton Push 3. Let's run it. Let's see if we got the right path. If not, we'll change it. Sometimes it's hard to remember off the top of your head and you have to go back and forth. Definitely gone through that multiple times before, but it looks like we got it right. So this took 11.28 seconds and we got a response. What are the new features? The Ableton Push 3. The Ableton Push 3 has new hardware, including new pads, MPE support, and audio, plus CV, plus MIDI connectivity, all this other stuff, which is pretty awesome. I'm pretty excited about it. But you can see now that this is an answer where it has gone through all those text snippets, uses context to then create a now answer. Now going back to that diagram, it's gone through this process here, now provide the final answer. And that's it. So now if I wanted to take this and then use this as a standalone API, I now go ahead and publish this first, and publish it. And now I can copy the URL, the endpoint URL, and start to use that, which would just mean it's basically a URL, and then you can use that in your front end or in Bubble in the API connector. And then the query parameter, if you go to run and debug, like it's just going to be this search query. So you just kind of copy this into the body, and then you replace this on that side. That's it. The other thing that you can do is like use this as a function within Xano, and we'll kind of go through that process, which we're actually going to do to be able to use it as a potential tool as that the AI agent could use. But for today, let's just keep it as an API endpoint. This is what it is. You go to this endpoint, you put in a search query, you get a result, and whether the result is directly shown in Google or it's a summation of or taking the context of all the search results and then providing an answer, and based on that, it does either of those based on the context of what's provided back and gives you an answer in the end. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.